Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Around the House. Today, we're going to be turning my 18 by 20 foot shop from this to this. So let's get started. Okay, here's the plan. I want to add some functionality to my shop, so I'm going to build a custom workbench. After that, I'm going to add some commercial grade racks for some much needed storage. And finally, I will completely reorganize the tool wall. But first, we started this upgrade project by prepping and painting the floors. The first part of prepping was to use floor leveling cement on some of the damaged parts of the shop. Then we thoroughly cleaned the floor and started painting with Rust-Oleum concrete and garage paint, which only set us back about $35 per gallon. We ended up using about 2.5 gallons to finish the shop. Step 2 was building and installing my new workbench. I started out by constructing the frame. Because the length of this workbench was going to be over 8 feet, I had to build it in 2 sections. This first section was pretty straightforward as it was a basic rectangle. I used treated 2x4s, which made the frame a little heavier, but it attached to the wall with ease. The second section had a large cutout at the end so I could install an old cabinet drawer. Luckily for me, the only material I had to spend money on for this workbench were the 2x4s. Everything else was odds and ends that were lying around. After getting the workbench frame attached to the wall, I started cutting and attaching the top. For the top, I decided to have 2 layers, the bottom layer consisting of 1/2-inch plywood and the top layer consisting of 3/8 plywood. The reason I did this is so if I damage the top layer, I only have to replace a 3/8 piece of plywood instead of almost an inch thick piece of plywood. I secured the 1/2-inch plywood with 1.5-inch drywall screws, and I attached the 3/8 plywood with 1.5-inch brad nails. Next, I got out my trusty sander and applied 60 grit sandpaper to it. I went over the top layer of the workbench twice with the 60 grit sandpaper, and then went over it one more time with 150 grit sandpaper. Then I cleaned up the surface and applied the Minwax stain. I was happy to see my girlfriend, aka Big Fan from Big Fan Secret Kitchen and Big Fan Art Studio, because it was starting to get late and she came to help me finish up. I'll put a link to her channel in the description below. We didn't want an extremely dark surface, so she would apply a little stain, allow it to soak in for a couple of minutes, and then she would wipe it down. When she was done, we allowed it to dry overnight. I typically use polyurethane to seal my wood projects, but on this one, I didn't want layers of polyurethane on the top of my workbench. So I looked around my shop and I found this Thompson's water seal, which would do exactly what I wanted it to do. I just wanted something to protect the wood just in case it got wet. I applied 2 coats and then allowed it to dry for 72 hours. And if you were wondering what that big hole in the workbench was for, it's for the router table. Step 3 was assembling the commercial grade storage racks and was by far the easiest but most expensive step. These racks cost around $160 at Northern Tool and Equipment, but they are well worth it as it has a 6,000 pound overall load capacity. These racks are very simple to put together. Start by standing up the vertical pillars, then attach the horizontal supports to make the structure solid. Then, slide in the internal supports and secure them in place with the hardware that is included. Lastly, set the metal grates on top and you're ready to start filling them up. The last step of this workshop project was to reorganize the tool wall. My Uncle Bob and Aunt Carrie had created this really cool design for a pegboard door where you could hang tools from both sides. Unfortunately, they were a little too big for what I had in mind. I needed more storage under the doors for shelves and carts that I used during the remodeling projects. So I started by completely dismantling the wall and putting everything out of the way on a table and the floor in hopes of putting it back after installing the new doors. After that, I cut the old doors down to size, reinstalled them, and then decided to install the many hardware organizers I had stashed in the back room. The icing on the cake for me was adding these LED lights so I could actually see what I'm doing when I'm working in the shop. We still have a ton of work to do behind the main portion of my shop, but I have to say I could not be happier about the way that it turned out. The workbench is a work in progress, as we will add onto it both below and above to start organizing more of our tools, but I have already used the new router table and it is exactly what I wanted. I didn't mention it before, but I added this little area behind the workbench for my dad because he had this Craftsman workbench and rolling toolbox for so many years, and he likes to tinker in the shop from time to time. I would love to hear some of your ideas of what I could do to make this workbench better, so please drop me a line in the comments below. This property came with a permanently established Vagabond trailer from the 1970s, and I had been using it for storage ever since I purchased the property. I decided to turn this Vagabond trailer into an art studio for Big Fan, so this storage rack came in extremely handy. If you're interested, I'll be making a video about that remodel as well coming soon. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed making it. We can now park the car in the garage and we have that beautiful workbench on the other side of this storage. Now we can actually have some function and actually use this as the intended garage. So thank you for watching. Please hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye!